Hello everyone, it's me, Gary Ray Smith, the Knitting Man. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. This is episode 2, how I knit colourwork, English style, without floats. Hello everyone, welcome back. It's episode 2 of the Knitting Man podcast. This is Atlas's blanket, by the way. It says 2019 on it because that's when he was born, but Atlas is sort of 2.5 at the moment, and so I knitted it last year, so some of you might have watched me do that on Instagram. So I thought it'd be a nice backdrop for episode 2. Welcome back, and I'd like to say thank you to everybody that commented or subscribed on my last video, my first video. Thank you for your support, it's been great. We really loved reading all your comments, and I've responded to them all, I think. Let me know if I haven't responded to your comment. I think I've responded to every one. But if it's your first time, what this podcast is about is trying to help and encourage people to develop their skills, their confidence and their creativity in colourwork knitting. And that's really what we've defined as what we want to do going forward. And today we've got 4 different sections. So we've got a how-to section, and we're going to do the same how-to section that we did last week, which is stranded colourwork without floats, and that's English style. So steeking that we were going to do this week is now going to be moved to next week, and the reason that we're redoing it is because Mrs. Smith made a little bit of a rookie error there, because she filmed it portrait when it should have been filmed landscape. So it came up very small on everybody's screens, particularly if people were using a mobile phone. So, and the other reason is that we used a dark yarn. So we're going to refilm it with a lighter yarn, which hopefully will work better. You'll be able to see what I'm doing better. The next section that we've got is called Travels with My Yarn. Which is a Graham Greene reference, and this week we're in Porthleven Harbour in Cornwall, which is a little bit bleak. It was a bit cold. Then we've got a new section, and this is really comes out of all the questions, all the lovely questions that we got. We won't be able to answer all your questions, I'm sure. But this question was inspired by Ali, and it's about the difference between Intarsia and Pharaoh. So the difference between Intarsia and stranded knitting. So we'll be looking at the pros and cons of both of those later on. And then part 4, we've got how I learned to knit part 2. So last week I did up to the 80s. I was talking about knitting in the 70s and 80s, and this week I'm going to be doing the 90s. And the other thing that I might start to do is tell you about my week, I don't know if anyone's really interested, but this week I work part-time. I do graphic design for a sign company, and I make signs too. And this week I've worked 3 days, so that's not given me a lot of time to do all the stuff that I want to do. So this week I'm finishing off my Death's Head moth blanket, and that is the chart for that, which is available in my Etsy shop, and I really wanted to get that on Ravelry. In order to do that, I wanted to finish knitting it so that I could weigh it and work out how much yarn I've used, but because I've worked 3 days, it's put me back slightly. Now, how I finish that blanket will be in next week's episode. So here it is. It's I'll just take that crochet hook out. So crochet hook. So it's complete now. So it's all screwed up where it's been in my bag. It's complete now, and you can probably see there, I wouldn't normally crochet either side of the steek in a clearly different colour. I'd probably crochet that black, but because I want to film it to show you guys what I do, so I'm going to crochet there, or I am crocheting there, and I'm going to crochet here, and I'm going to cut the steek in the middle there. So that's going to happen. That will happen tomorrow now. So that's Death's Head moths. And the other thing is, knowing that that is going to be finished soon, I've allowed myself to start thinking about another project. And this week was the Chinese New Year, Year of the Tiger. So this is one of my paintings. This is actually a painting of a tiger. And I was thinking about converting this to a blanket. But then the other thing that I might do, this is one of my other posters. This is a print that, again, you can get from the Etsy shop. This is a polar bear. So I'm not sure, I'm a bit torn. If anybody's got a preference, tiger or polar bear, let me know in the comments below. And one of those I think is going to be my next project. I've got a hare with an angel on the back that is for Vera's blanket. I've knitted so far 5 blankets, and Vera, somehow I haven't finished hers. I started it and I haven't finished it. Whether I'll continue from where I am, I don't know, or whether I'll start again, I've got to decide. But I'll get this Death's Head moth blanket out of the way first, which is for my granddaughter Ariadne. So without more ado, this is Travels with My Yarn, and this week we're in Porthleven. Here we go.
She's really naughty teeth. Oh, she's still smiling though. Yeah. Hey. Oh. Atlas? What's Grandad doing? That is correct.
So that was Porth 11. It was a cold day, and I was there with my grandchildren. Atlas was there, and this is Atlas's blanket, and Vera was there. I haven't done Vera's blanket yet. That will be the next one that I do. And Doris was there, and that's Doris's blanket. So I'm just trying to, so you understand which kids go with which blankets. Yes, it was cold, but obviously there are benefits to knitting outdoors. The main benefit being that it doesn't set off Mrs. Smith's wool allergy. We've had loads of questions this week, and please keep them coming, and if we get too many we'll just do a whole episode on questions. It took me ages to answer this one, so I've only got the answer to one question. Not that there are answers there, you know, there's not a right way and a wrong way of doing anything. In actual fact, I was speaking to Erica this week online, and she was saying that she'd been at a bus stop and she was knitting at a bus stop, and two ladies had said she was doing it the wrong way. And I was thinking, well, there isn't a right and a wrong way. There isn't. There's just the best way for you. So I think that's true, you know, in knitting. There's not a right or wrong way of doing anything. It's just what suits you best. So here we are with my first question. So we talked earlier about carrying yarn, and we had a question from Ali this week, which I thought was quite a useful question to explore. And she wanted to know whether she could use that technique for Intarsia knitting. And the answer is yes, but. So I think Ali's talking about an emblem, maybe one side on a sock which is being knitted in the round. So she can use it, but she'd have to use a fair isle technique really, rather than Intarsia technique, because how Intarsia works, and there's two different things you can do with Intarsia. So this is an old blanket which I'm going to talk about in the next section, which is how I learnt to knit part 2, the 90s. And this is knitted in Intarsia, and as you can see on the front there are these blobs of colour in a big pinkish background. So they're knitted in Intarsia. Now there's two ways you can knit Intarsia really. So the first way would be that you could knit pink and then swap over to the lighter colour there and leave a ball of pink hanging to come back to, then knit the lighter colour and then attach another ball of pink and then carry on to the end, and then when you come back you pick up the lighter colour, leave the pink where it is, knit the lighter colour to the end of that section there, leave the light ball and then knit pink to the end and then come back again. So that's one way of doing Intarsia. although I knitted this flat, I knitted it so that the pink is carried right the way across. So there's only 2 balls of yarn, not 3 balls of yarn being used. So I knit across the pink, and then I knit both colours to the end of the light section. So I'm carrying the pink while I'm knitting the lighter colour, and then I knit pink to the end, then I come back, and then I'm knitting. So I'm knitting, so there's a double thickness on the Intarsia parts, and I think that that is what Ali was talking about. But the problem is this was knitted in the flat. So if she's knitting the socks in the round, because she is not going to the end and back again, she would need to knit it ferrule. So sorry, I just went to get a sock. So this is a sock I darned earlier. Probably at some point I will talk about my darning, because I do like to darn. So if Ali's knitting the sock in the round and she's got an emblem on one side, she can't knit that in Intarsia, because when she comes back round, the yarn will be in the wrong place. So let me do a drawing to try and explain this, because it's quite difficult to explain. So if I draw a sock, and then I draw a big blue emblem. So there's the sock with a big blue emblem. And if you're knitting this sock in the round, so you come along and then you pick up, so you're knitting the white, you pick up the blue and you drop the blue, and then you carry on knitting the white. So you've dropped the blue here and you've got a ball of yarn hanging off of there. So you carry on knitting and you come back around and you get to here, and oh dear, it's on the wrong side. Your ball of yarn is on the wrong side. So you can't knit Intarsia in the round. Well, I sometimes do knit Intarsia in the round, but for the purposes of this, you can't do it. So what she would need to do is not leave that ball of yarn there. She would need to carry the blue with her all the way round. So for that section between there and there, she'd have a double thickness of yarn. Of course, the double thickness might affect the elasticity of the sock around this area. So I would think the best solution would be to Swiss darn the emblem on the side of the sock. The Swiss darning is also called duplicate stitch. There are some people, I follow some people that do amazing work with Swiss darning. There's one in Canada called Chelsea. I think she's called Northern Wilds. And also my friend Annie, she's called Labelle Pixie. She does some amazing, it's like an art form in itself. She's called Labelle Pixie. If anybody could put the information down below so people could find their work, that would be great. And I believe that the Tom Daley, the diver, I believe that his jumper, his Olympics jumper, to me it looks Swiss darned. I don't think that it was knitted ferrule. So, but again, if you know anything about that Tom Daley, just put them in the comments below. So I would say that Swiss darning is the solution to that problem. I don't use Swiss darning a great deal myself. I do use it because a lot of the time when I'm knitting my baby blankets, I'm knitting them in front of the TV, and I'll be following the chart loosely. You know, I don't, you know, I'll glance at the chart, but it's just a guide really. So a lot of the time I will make mistakes, and most of them I'll leave in, because I'm not too hard on myself really. So I leave quite a lot of mistakes, but if there's something glaring, then say for instance, on this, I don't think I did, I can't remember if I did on this one, but yeah, I might sort of change the shape of the wing if I got it wrong or something, just you put a bit of a few extra white stitches here or a few extra of the blue stitches there. But maybe that's something again that we'll do in a future episode. So thank you, Ali, for your question. I hope that we managed to answer it. Not that there are definitive answers, there's just options. And I hope we went through some of those. I was just looking back at some of my filming from earlier, and I noticed that there were some continuity problems. It's not my editing, it's that we are getting interrupted by children as we're filming. My glasses tend to be moving all over my face, I've noticed. Sometimes they're on my face, sometimes they're on the top of my head, sometimes they're nowhere. And the other thing that obviously does cause me to stop filming is Mrs. Smith's continuous censorship as I'm filming, which there I've got a child banging a door in the background there. I don't know if you heard that. So now we'll go on to how I learnt to knit part 2, the 90s. So how I learnt to knit part 2, the 90s, but we left me in the mid 80s persevering, trying to work out how to do ferrule. I've got big floats on the back of my knitting, my tension's all wrong. And what happened was I went home one weekend and my mum taught me how to knit in the ends of my yarn as I was going along. And I thought that I could use that technique for ferrule. So in the mid 80s, I'm using the same technique then that I use today, because I found when I tried to knit ferrule with that technique, everything just seemed to fall into place. So I was using that for colourwork, and I was designing jumpers rather like I do now, where I'd work out how many stitches. I might do a swatch first. Back then I tend not to swatch so much now because I use the same size needles and I use a similar thickness of yarn, so I know pretty much if I'm using a fingering weight yarn with a 3.5 millimeter needle, that as long as I'm knitting in the round, my tension is pretty much the same, and I knit about 8 stitches to the inch. So if I wanted to knit a 40-inch chest garment, I just 8 times 40, and that's how many I cast on. But back then I'd be doing swatches, and I was knitting what you'd call picture knits. So they're pretty much the same. I've always liked a vest because it's, although at that time I would have been experimenting, I would have been doing cardigans, vests, jumpers, socks, hats, I was trying lace, I was trying everything, but I always came back to colourwork. And around about that time somebody was wearing one of my jumpers in London, and I got a call from a New York designer, quite a well-known New York designer, asking if I would like to do some work with them. But at that time I was busy and probably had a little bit of fear of failure as well. But I turned them down, and I wonder if I'd have carried on then, what might have happened. So the next thing that happens is I start to have kids. I've got 4 daughters, and so I started in the late 80s knitting clothes for them, and I wasn't trying to push my patterns or sell anything. It was just for fun. I was working back then. I was working as a personnel manager for a train company, the Fenchurch Street line, if anybody's interested. And I would go home, and it was, you know, it would de-stress me, knitting. And I remember at that time the Kay Fassett TV show for Channel 4 had just come out, and I got the DVDs for it, and I used to sit knitting, just playing these DVDs back to back. I think there were two, and I'd put one in, play that, put the next one in, and I wish I knew what happened to those VHS tapes. Not that I've got a player, but yeah, I loved it, and I'd just sit and knit and just watch that and just look at all the lovely stuff on there. So and at that time, I do remember I saw Kay. I went to a book signing, and it was in a place called Keddy's in Southend-on-Sea in Essex, and I couldn't get the bottle up to go and speak to him, and he was sitting there, and he looked, you know, very handsome man, and he was just sitting there on his own quite quietly, and I thought, oh, shall I go over and talk to him? But I couldn't get myself to do it. I mean, now obviously I would, but back then I was too shy to go and talk to Kay. But it's a shame really, because I wish I had. And then in the late 90s, we were coming down to Cornwall quite a lot then. We hadn't moved here, we were still living in Essex, and I was doing a lot of seascape painting. Obviously my degree's in painting, so I've always painted, and I was doing a lot of what would be called colour-filled painting. So colour-filled paintings like Rothko or Patrick Heron, that was the sort of stuff that I was into, but it was seascape based. And so just have a swig of tea. This week's mug is it's a knitting bear. Missy Smith asked me to make a knitting bear mug, so I made a few of these. There's a few left in the Etsy shop if you're interested. So I started knitting similar stuff to the things that I was painting, and probably this is the most of what I have access to, because they've all gone. They were all sold back then, late 90s, early 2000s. They were sold in Essex and they were sold in Brighton. So if you've got one of these, it will have a label on it, and that's the label there. You'll be able to see that. So it says Spacey, Leon C. Smith. So if you've got one of those, that's one of mine. And yeah, this is the most, I've borrowed these from my sister-in-law's collection. My sister-in-law does have quite a large collection of my stuff, paintings, knitting, and so I've borrowed these just for this filming. Also, this one's got a hole in, which I'll repair before it goes back. Just to give you a bit of background, it was in 1997, I think, we came down to Cornwall as a family, for the first time as a family, and I was really I was looking at the water, and the water was sort of this sort of greens and blues, and it had purple shapes within it, They might have been rocks under the water, or they might have been clumps of seaweed, but they had these big purple shapes within blue water. So this is a reversed version of that. So that's the sort of thing that I was knitting in the late 90s. And these blankets, I just start knitting huge squares, and then I'd crochet round the edge. And this is a red one. Reds and oranges and pinks. And that would have been knitted about the same time, late 90s. So that was my first foray really into trying to sell my knits. I was buying up yarn mainly in charity shops, ends of lines, that sort of stuff in the knitting shops. So I was buying yarn as cheaply as I could, and I was just sort of knitting square meters of yarn. So I'm running 2, 3, 4, 5 different yarns together, mixing the colours. I suppose it's a big marling thing nowadays, but yeah, I was doing a lot of sort of mild stuff back in the 90s. So we'll leave it there for now. So we're now at the beginning of this century, and next time I'll probably bring you from there up to date. This is the second attempt at showing you how I carry floats in stranded knitting. So it looks as though there aren't any floats. There are floats, but they are just 1 stitch long. So that's the back of my knitting, and that's what we're trying to achieve, something like that. I'm going to knit the orange all the way along, and I'm going to carry the green. I'll just knit the first orange stitch. Right, so now I'm going to carry the green. So I put the needle in and the carrying yarn between the 2 needles, and I knit the orange. I'm not knitting the green, I'm just capturing the green, and then on the next stitch I just trap the green there. So it's a 2-stitch process. So the first stitch, it goes in, the green goes between the 2 needles, the carrying colour between the needles, and then I'm just trapping it. There's no tension on that green at all. So just lift it up, just trap the green there and knit past it. Put the green between the 2 needles and then knit past it. I'll just knit to the end of the row. 2-stitch process. The first stitch, just the green goes between the 2 needles, knit the orange as normal, and then just knit past it on the second stitch, right the way along to the end of the row. And there we are. So there's the front, and on the back that's what it looks like. And you can knit 100 stitches, 1,000 stitches if you wanted, carrying the other yarn. and it would still be fine. Okay, so there you are. I always knit in the round these days, so I just carry the yarn whilst I'm knitting. But I think some of you might like to see how I do it when I'm purling. Yeah, the technique is slightly different. So if you want me to film that, let me know in the comments below, and I'll put that up next week. So that's it for today. Thank you for being with me, and if you like it, subscribe, because that's going to encourage us to do more videos. Hit the like button, hit the bell if you want to see more. If you want to follow me on Instagram, I'm Gary Ray Smith on Instagram, and I don't have much on Ravelry at the moment. I've got one design on Ravelry, but I will have more. And but most of my patterns are available as posters on Etsy at the moment. Thank you very much. See you again soon.